I call this meeting to order, and I will read the published notice and agenda. Board of Alders notice, New Haven. The Finance Committee will hold a public hearing on Monday, February 14th, 2022 at 6 p.m. via video conference. Meeting can be viewed at https://bit.ly/3GU V, or by phone at 301-715-8592 or 312-626-6799. Meeting webinar ID 978-7958-3712. Phone passcode 776-787-746. Item 1, LM 2021-0540. Order of the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven, authorizing the execution of the Go Guardian Agreement with the Board of Education for the period of July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2024. Item 2, LM 2021-0541. Order of the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven, authorizing the execution of the United Brotherhood of Carpenters and Joiners of America, Local 24, Brotherhood of Painters and Allied Trades, District Council 11, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 90, and United Association of Journeymen and Apprentices of the Plumbing and Pipe Fitting Industry of the United States and Canada, Local 777. Agreement with the Board of Education for the period of July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2026. Item 3, LM 2021-0552. Order of the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven, authorizing the execution of the agreement with the Connecticut Association for the Performing Arts, CAPA, for the period of July 1st, 2021 to June 30, 2022. Item 4, LM-2021-0624. Order of the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven, authorizing the execution of the SPELLA, LLC agreement with the Board of Education for the period of October 1st, 2021 to June 30, 2025. Item number 5, OR-2021-0042. Ordinance amendment to appropriating ordinance number 1, authorizing the reclassification of the position of processing clerk, number 830, to assistant registrar or bilingual if needed in the Health Department Vital Statistics Office. Item 6, LM-2021-0650. Order of the Board of Alders of the City of New Haven, approving and authorizing the Department of Parks and Public Works to exceed the fiscal year 2021-22 contract with SESCO in excess of $100,000. Item 7, LM-2021-0494. Order of the New Haven Board of Alders authorizing the City of New Haven, Mayor or Comptroller, to enter into a 4-year agreement with ShotSpotter Incorporated in the amount of $1,676,919 to expand and provide gunfire detection system software. These items are filed with the city clerk and may be inspected at room 202, 200 Orange Street, New Haven. Per order, the Honorable Adam Marchand, Chair, attest Michael Smart, City Clerk. If you need a disability-related accommodation, please call 3 business days in advance, 946-7651-VOICE or 946-8582 TTY. The public may join the meeting and may send public comment to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov. The meeting may be viewed at https://bit.ly/3GU VRIX or by phone at 301-715-8592 or 312-626-6799. Meeting webinar ID 978-7958-3712. Phone passcode 776-787-746. Note, since the meeting is remote, participation by a quorum of members is expressly prohibited at the physical location and will not be present However, any member of the public may request in writing a physical location and any electronic equipment necessary to attend the meeting in real time no later than 24 hours prior to the meeting. Said individual shall have the same opportunities to provide comment or otherwise participate in the meeting as would be afforded if the meeting was held in person, with the following exception. Under law, if such person loses the ability to participate because of an interruption, failure, or degradation of such person's connection to the meeting by electronic equipment, the committee is not required to adjourn or postpone the meeting. Hello, everybody. As you can see, we have quite an agenda. We will now move to introductions of the committee. As I said before, my name is Adam Marchand. I'm the Alder of the 25th Ward and Chair of the committee. Alder Hurt.
Alder Ron Hurt, Alder of the 3rd Ward, Vice Chair of the committee.
Alder Santiago.
Alder Santiago, Ward 15.
Alder Walker Myers.
Alder Walker Myers, Ward 23.
Alder Festa.
Anna Festa, Ward 10.
Alder Furlow.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Richard Furlow, Ward 27.
Thank you, sir. Alder Winter.
Stephen Winter, Ward 21.
Thank you, everybody. I want to welcome everyone to this meeting, including all of the members of the committee, all the members of the public, city staff. I would like to recognize Alder Sarah Miller, who is also with us. I am grateful for colleagues so quickly understanding the protocol, which is if you're on the committee, your camera's on unless you need to be off momentarily for some reason. And if you're on the not on the committee, your camera is off, although we'll have you in the panelist room. And now I will hand it over to my vice chair for a few procedural announcements.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to give my thanks and my gratitude to my colleagues, you, Mr. Chair, Madam President, who chose me to serve in this role. I take it very serious, and I'm not taking it lightly. It's an honor to serve next to you, Mr. Chair, colleagues in the Finance Committee. My mom always told me, I call her Big Mama. She said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. We've been in a pandemic. We've been in virtual meetings for the most part. And the procedure has been the same, and it works. And we want to continue on with this procedure. I'm asking all colleagues that you will be ready on the queue when Mr. Chair call on you for questioning. Please limit your questionings to 4 and be clear and concise with your questions. We also want to make mention that there are some items that are under tight constraints. One being our union contract. The chair will ask that the full board discharge from this committee so it could be voted upon right away. Like manner, the administration has made similar requests about other items on our agenda. Items 1, 3, 4, and 7. These are under tight constraints as well. So we're asking that the chair will ask for these items to be discharged from this committee. But we will be voting on tonight items 5 and 6. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I welcome you to the new role, and I also welcome to the committee Alder Winter, who is new to finance. I welcome back colleagues who've served on this committee before. And without any further ado, let us move to item 1 and trust our city staff to promote the appropriate people. This is the Go Guardian contract. So I imagine we'll have Mr. Gormany and representatives from the Board of Ed. I see that folks are being promoted now. There's a familiar face.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Chair Marchand, committee members. My address for the record, Michael Gormany, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut, City Acting Controller and Budget Director. And with me for this item is the Board of Ed IT Director, Ms. Herrera.
Ms.
You're on
Herrera,
mute.
Good
name and
evening.
address for the record, please.
How are you? My name is Gildemar Herrera. I live at 722 2nd Avenue, West Haven, Connecticut.
Thank you.
And Mr. Lamb, the Chief Operating Officer, is on as well.
Good evening, thank you. Thomas Lamb, Chief Operating Officer, New Haven Public Schools, 100 Woodside Court, Trumbull, Connecticut.
Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. So as you mentioned, the first item on the agenda is a Board of Education IT contract with Go Guardian, which we are looking for approval for a multi-year contract that runs from July 1st of 2021 through June 30th of 2024. So I will turn it over to Ms. Herrera to give some background on this contract.
Good evening. This is actually a classroom management tool. It allows the teachers to see what is going on in the screens of the students in the classroom. They can see the activity and the on and off tabs, or anything that they're having during the classroom time, they're actually able to monitor. This is a license. We're going to be licensing 22,000 students. This includes the teachers that will be licensed. And currently it's being funded through the ESSER 2. It will be funded until the 24th year through the ESSER. In the future, we'll be looking for funding through other grants. And if no grant funding is available, we'll have to look at adding it to the general fund.
All right, thank you, Ms. Herrera. To add on a little context to this, the agreement is for approximately a little bit over $70,000. That was the pricing that the vendor gave us on a multi-year basis. If we were to do this contract on a one-year basis, there would be, and Ms. Herrera, correct me if I'm wrong, about a 20% increasing per year in the pricing from the vendor.
Correct.
So
It's about
that is-
$20,000. Sorry, excuse me. It's about $20,000 more a year, per year, that we're saving.
So that was one of the other reasons, even in looking that this is paid off of the ESSER grant, we are still utilizing savings by putting this contract through the Board of Alders as a multi-year agreement. Again, this was also approved by the Finance and Operations Committee through the Board of Education, as well as the full Board of Education as well. This is actually coming to this board a little later due to some mix-up in the paperwork, because this was approved through the Board of Education in either August or September 2021. But again, due to mix-up in paperwork, we found out it was not submitted and communicated to the Board of Alders until recently. So that is one of the reasons that we're looking for this to be discharged as well. The vendor has been working with us and has been able to hold pricing thus far for the Board of Education. So I believe, unless Ms. Herrera, unless you have anything else to add, I believe, Mr. Chair, we can open it up to questions.
Thank you, Mr. Gormany, and thank you, Ms. Herrera, for your concise presentation. We will now take questions from members of the committee, starting with Vice Chair Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one quick question. Are there any penalties attached to this bin that has been presented to us late?
No. The vendor agreed to work with me and they've been more than patient. They have been good.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. Alder Santiago.
Yeah, I got a question. First of all, I mean, this is like every year is the same story. They do things months before and they come to us like a week before we have to vote on it, you know? I mean, it was in August, September, was that like 5 months? Who was supposed to do the paperwork, you know, to present it to us? I mean, what was the mix-up? Do anybody knows what the mix-up was?
I think, Alder Santiago, there was a transition in, the process in submitting the paperwork to the Board of Alders from the Board of Education, as well as, if you remember, around that time period, that was when our liaison to the Board of Ed, Ms. Anderson, had also was in the process of leaving the city. So, I think between that period, that's where the paperwork kind of got mixed up.
Okay, so he got me so for 5 months. So that person was living for 5 months. I mean, just it's just frustrating that every year it's the same thing. Things come here to us late, and we have to vote on it. But anyways, no, that was my only question. Thank you for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder Santiago. I think that's a totally appropriate question. Before we go to the next Alder on the list, I want to recognize our colleague, Alder Jeanette Morrison, who's a member of our committee. Welcome, Alder Morrison. I also want to just note that our colleague, Alder Douglas, is not feeling well and is not able to join us. I know that Alder Dakota is away, and I heard today that Alder Hamilton had to attend to an urgent family matter. So let's give our thoughts to our colleagues who are either in transit or dealing with other matters. So next on the list of alders to ask questions would be Alder Walker-Myers.
I have no questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Alder Festa, you're next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and congratulations on being chair. I have some questions. I'm not sure exactly what this software is for, and we're using ESSER funds for it. What kind of management are we talking about? Classroom management are we talking about? Can someone just describe it for us, please?
Yes, it actually is, and it's an application. It encumbers taking all the class in. So when the students are remote or in class, we have provided more than 35,000 devices to the students previously to ESSER, to the COVID, and to the ESSER grant. We actually now have 35,000 devices. We're using them remotely, but on site. Now that we're using all these devices on site, the teachers need the ability to monitor and keep the kids on task. So what's happening is the kids go online, they get the curriculum online, they work in the classroom, but while they're working in the classroom, there's distractions that we found. During this finding, we actually went out and bought GoGuardian, which is not just us, many districts purchase GoGuardian to keep the children on task and the students and even other volunteers that we have. So we are actually able to take the software, the application allows us to monitor what kind of access do they have. So if the teacher doesn't want them, let's say on YouTube, on Instagram, TikTok, whatever, FYI, TikTok is not allowed in the district, but so that's the type of thing that we're doing. We're actually focusing, and it assists the teachers in managing their classrooms, because now the students, even though they're on site, they have a device in hand. So the teachers must be able to see what is it that they're doing in those devices so they could keep them on task.
Is this only on devices that are issued through the Board of Ed, or is this also personal devices?
No, only devices that I provide, that the district provides.
Okay, so if my child goes to school with their own personal device, this software is not activated once they're in the school system's software.
Well, actually, how it works is it looks at your ID. So when you log in through your Google account through NHPS, it actually looks at that account. A roster is made through the teacher, allows a roster. That's what GoGuardian does. It has a roster of students. So those are the students that are supposed to be in your class, and those are the students that will be monitored.
So if my child goes to school with their personal device and signs on with their school ID, you're getting in there and monitoring.
Correct, because what happens is it's like an enclosed application. So I can't see all of your device. I could see what you could do inside of my application. So while the curriculum's going on, that is inside of that application. So that's how the students are being taught. GoGuardian is one of the tools through the Google Classroom. So it actually goes inside of Google Classroom and it monitors what it is that your child is doing within our application.
So if my child comes home with their personal computer and they access their school ID and they go into YouTube in off hours of school, this is okay? You're getting in there too?
No, after
Okay.
4 p.m., it gets turned off.
Okay, so I want to know what kind of privacy is attached to this type of software, because if it's also being used, with all devices, I want to make sure that there's privacy.
May I? It's not the device itself. It's the access that you have through the district. So it doesn't.
Exactly. That's my concern.
Well, yeah, but what happens is that when the students utilize their ID to sign in, what they're really signing in is to the Google Class. So this is monitoring that Google Classroom. It isn't going outside. Like if the student is going outside and doing other things outside of that Google Classroom, it's not monitoring that. What it's monitoring is what's going inside of that particular Google Classroom. So if you could take your device, right, from school or from your home and you bring in and you log into your Google Classroom, which is actually owned by us. You go in, you actually enter that Google Classroom, the student goes in, we're monitoring the actual software and the application that we're providing. We're not monitoring your personal Yahoo, we don't do that. What we're monitoring is the software that we've purchased, our Google Classroom, with GoGuardian. And even though you are accessing it through your personal device, you still are accessing the Google Classroom, which is an application that we control, that is actually a controlled environment.
Okay.
Alder
And
Festa, this is Chair Marchand. I noticed that your first question was, what is it? Your second question is the privacy issues, and I've allowed you to ask several follow-ups. So I'm generously counting that as 2 questions. So you have 2 more that you would need to get to.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, so the cost of the software for how many years was it again? 3. Okay, till 2024 is $70K per year or total?
$70,000 per year. The total is $211,860. We're actually saving $22,000 per year, which is $66,000 for the duration of the contract.
Okay, and I guess a question for the city is, this comes out of the ESSER funds right now, but if we continue using this platform, it will be coming out of the general funds budget, right? Not the Board of Ed budget.
No, so there we go. So thank you, Alder Festa, for that question. The Board of Education has its own IT general fund budget, so it would be coming out of their IT general fund budget. As Ms. Herrera said, one of the things that we continue to try to look for are grants for applications such as this. But yes, after this 3-year period, if we cannot find another grant to supplement the cost of this, it would go on to the Board of Ed's IT budget as an operating expense in the general fund.
Okay, so why is it coming to us?
This is a multi-year contract, so it's a 3-year contract.
Just the contract.
So,
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so I mean, we just have to yay or nay the multi-year contract, just that.
That's right.
Okay,
It's one of the triggers for aldermanic review.
okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. And I have to apologize to colleagues that in the moment of recognizing Alder Morrison, I completely skipped over her. And she should have been earlier in the queue, but now I suppose you're ready for your questions. Alder Morrison.
I don't have a question, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alder
Thank
Morrison.
you for recognizing where I am in the queue. I'm looking forward to know where that falls. So
We'll
thank
get
you.
it right on the next round,
Thank
Alder
you.
Morrison. Alder Furlow, questions, sir?
I have no questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Alder Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is the software currently being used? Or is it going to be, it is currently being used?
Yes, that's how we monitor the students as we speak.
And are we currently under a single year contract or are we operating and using the software under the multi-year agreement?
It is, I'm using it currently. I'm using the first year, the 3 years. A purchase order was done because this is licensing. So I was able to do a purchase order for the first year, and I was able to speak to the vendor, and the vendor agreed that they would wait till it would actually go to the holders. Because I had asked them to please, because I needed them to hold the pricing. And they were kind enough and gracious enough to work with us.
Are there other businesses that provide similar services and might be able to provide these services to the Board of Education?
Not to this extent, not to the extent of the kind of service they provide.
And what are the procedures? I'm not sure who's best for this question, but what are the procedures around this kind of sole source contract?
The way we chose it was the need, right? So during COVID, we had the need to monitor the students because a lot of inappropriate and other kind of communications were going on, right? Plus, it wasn't even the communication so much, it was how we wanted to implement the curriculum and how we wanted to keep the kids on task. So that's what we were using this for. So what happened was the state, we started looking for software, multiple, I looked everywhere. I mean, I went out to other districts. I have a forum that I'm a part of throughout the district of Connecticut. And I actually asked my colleagues throughout the state, what is everybody using? What's it cost? And so we brought in demos of a couple of things. And GoGuardian was the one that provided the most, being the size of this district. There's other software, but what happens is that what they do is not quite what we need. It's limited. So we needed a lot of things because we have a lot of creative people. And that creativity needed extra attention in some sort. So this software allowed us to manage those things. It was one of those things that the teachers, and plus the teachers were asking for it. The teachers had to do 2 curriculums, 2 agendas, when they did the classroom, they did some on paper and then they would have to do it online. And it became something that it became a problem. So we needed to look for an actual solution for the teachers. And honestly, I don't have any teachers that complain about it. They appreciate the fact that we got the software and the kids, and they allow the kids to stay on task because, like I said, they could control what kind of access they have, where they go. And if, let's say the kids are, logging into other things, YouTube and watching something else, the teacher could see it and the teacher could shut it down while in class and bring you back to the task at hand.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Winter. And thank you, Ms. Herrera, for answering our questions. I'm going to see if any members of the public wish to testify on this item. And members of the public may indicate their desire to testify by raising their hand That's one of the Zoom functions on your screen. You may also send an email to public testimony at newhavenct.gov. If you're on the phone, you could do *6. These are different ways that a member of the public could let us know. You could also use the Q&A function, not to submit your testimony, but simply to get our attention that you wish to testify. And as I wait to see if anybody sends us that indication, I want to recognize our colleague Alder Smith, who has joined us. Any member of the public wishing to testify on item number 1, the contract with Go Guardian. And for a third time, would any member of the public wish to testify on this item? Seeing none, we will move to item 2, also with the Board of Education. Alder Santiago, do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, I got something that I thought about. I know it's not in the Board of Education budget. Now, this is because of the COVID, right? What if we go back to the classrooms a year earlier? Is there a penalty if the contract, gets like in 2023 instead of 24?
I don't foresee anytime soon us getting away from the devices that we distributed. We have distributed over 35,000 devices, which means every student has a device in their hands. And this is now the norm that to have the students. So no, is there a penalty?
Yeah.
The idea is that if we go into the 3-year contract, there has to be a 3-year contract.
Yeah, but I don't know if you understood my question. I know you could give out 100. You could have given out 100,000 devices, but if COVID goes down and we go back to class, you don't need those devices. You won't need it anymore. Let's put it that way, because they'll be in class.
We are
regardless of how many. Yes, regardless of how many computers or laptops you gave out.
No,
I mean,
we are in class, and this is now part of the curriculum. That's what I'm trying to say.
in class. Okay, bye-bye. Yeah, okay. I misunderstood.
Curriculum. So it needs to be monitored going forward.
My bad. I thought it was only when they were away from school.
No.
My misunderstanding. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Santiago. That was a useful clarification. Thank you for that. Last call for members of the public on this item. Seeing none, let's move to item 2, also with the Board of Education, the tentative agreement with the trades unions.
All right. Michael Barmany, 45 Jefferson Road, Brantford, Connecticut. I believe Mr. Lamb, the COO, is going to present this particular union agreement for the Board of Ed, which is with our trades union, one of the smaller unions for the Board of Education. So I will turn it over to Mr. Lamb.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Gormany. This is a renewal of the trade union contract with Union 777, along with several other trade unions that come together to make this group. This union contract came up for renewal right as I started my tenure with the district, about actually more than that now, around May of last year. And we went through some negotiations and came to a tentative agreement. There is not a lot of changes to the existing agreement. Predominantly, the trades union provides services related to painting, plumbing, electrical work, HVAC. We have some HVAC talented tradesmen that are part of the union. This was a very collaborative process. The trades union, myself, the former CFO for the school district, sat with the trade union leadership and had very cordial conversations. Neither one of us got everything that we wanted, but we did come to some agreements. these trade unions provide a service to 4.6 million square feet of space throughout the district, in cooperation with the contracts, the on-call contracts that we have for various vendors that provide additional assistance to the trades staff to be able to complete maintenance work to the district. Just to highlight some of the changes that we have made to the contract. The length of the contract went from a 4-year to a 5-year. This will help us to be able to keep a more longer stability with union and with district membership. We also increased the number of trade staff from 10 to 14. This is not the exact number that we wanted, but I think it's where we're able to achieve with our budget with the Board of Ed. Also, for the last 2 contracts, the healthcare contributions from the members have been flat at 2%. We were able to negotiate an increase in the contribution that will escalate by 0.5% in years 3 and 5. And lastly, the one area that we had several hours of negotiation on were wages, and we have the wage table increase across in the past had been 2% flat, and in the new contract it'll be 2.5% in years 1 and 2, 2.75% in year 3, and 3% in year 4 and 5 of the contract. With several trades coming closer to retirement and the market for trades becoming more and more difficult, we need to be as competitive as possible to attract good talent. That is all I have for the trades union contract. If there's any questions, I will certainly do my best to answer them as best I can.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Mr. Gormany, do you have anything to add before we have questions from members of the committee?
No, I believe Mr. Lamb covered all the basics of the union agreement. Again, as mentioned at the beginning of this meeting, we are asking for a discharge of this item due to the timing. This was communicated in December, but again, there was no board meeting in January, and with union contracts, there are certain timeframes in which items have to be approved.
Thank you, Mr. Gormany, for reminding us of those important facts. So, questions from committee members, starting with Vice Chair Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I see that this contract are there going to be any more changes? This is a final contract.
This is the final contract.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. Alder Santiago.
No question at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Morrison.
No questions at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Walker Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I just have a question. So with the percentage increases throughout the life of the contract, you feel comfortable that this put us in a good position when those trades retire, that will be marketable? Because we always hear that the different jobs in the city don't pay a lot of money, so it's hard to actually get people.
Will be marketable within the city of New Haven. I don't know about once we start looking at other areas of the state and pulling from other markets. It's difficult to say where those will be in 3-5 years from now. It's a guessing game.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker-Myers. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is it my turn or Alder Morrison's turn?
It is your turn. I already called on Alder Morrison in her proper spot in the queue.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure because I usually follow Alder Morrison, creatures of habit here.
Yes, Alder Festa, it might take us a meeting or two to get used to the slightly different sequence of how we're listed.
Thank you. I do, just to follow up. So we don't following up to President Walker-Myers' question regarding how we compare. We don't have a comparison with other districts on how our contract looks versus theirs.
No, we don't. That was not something that we did.
Okay, so we have nothing to really say ours is better or.
It's more based on the experience of the people sitting at the table and in speaking with the trades union and with other market the other people within the market. So looking at different trade schools, what they see as will be coming out of the district, out of those trade schools into the unions, as far as what the market will be for those specific trades. It varies from trade to trade, very, very drastically. So it's really hard to say that one trade is going to be more than another. But typically there are trades that carry a higher salary, and it's all going to be dependent upon what the market for those trades is at that time.
Okay, and this contract was voted on favorably by the members of the union?
It was fully ratified, yes.
Okay. And just one last question regarding the healthcare contribution. You mentioned in years 3 and 5, a 0.5% contribution by the employee?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Alder Furlow.
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Alder Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are the pension, there wasn't any mention of the pension provisions. Are the pension provisions the same? It looked like, is that correct?
Yes, nothing in the pension has changed.
And it looks like the required contribution is 10% currently, and that would remain the same.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Winter. Mr. Lamb, I have a question. When I reviewed the material, it seemed like the kind of increasing fiscal impact of the contract was greater. The delta was greater between the early years of the contract as opposed to the later years of the contract. And I'm wondering if that's because of any retroactivity provisions, or is it because you're adding positions?
A little bit of both. That was something that our former CFO developed. So I wasn't really privy to his process, but I do believe it was a combination of the fiscal impact of adding the positions, as well as looking at the increased percentages over the length of the contract.
And the reason I asked is because the percentage jump from year 1 to year 2 is much bigger than the percentage jump between the last 2 years, even though the across the board increases are bigger. And so it must be other costs that are, although the healthcare contributions go up a little bit at the end of the contract, which may moderate the increase of this.
Correct. That was the intent, was to balance it with the contribution on the healthcare costs.
Okay. And when you said, Mr. Lamb, that the 14 positions, moving from 10 to 14 wasn't exactly what you were looking for. Could you tell us, did you want to add fewer and the union wanted to add more? Or
No,
was
I
it
wanted to
the
add
other way
more.
around? You wanted to
I
add
wanted to,
more.
I wanted to add more, but as our budget just couldn't handle it.
So it wasn't a negotiations
No,
point,
it
it was a
wasn't.
budgetary point.
No, it was a budgetary point.
Okay. And in what trades were the 4 additional positions put into, or will they be
So
put into?
when they are posted, the union and I and other members of the facilities team will determine what those positions are.
Okay, so it hasn't been decided yet.
No, it has not yet been decided.
Okay, thank you so much. All right. Would any member of the public wish to testify on this item, the tentative agreement between the various trades and the Board of Education? And again, I remind members of the public that they may indicate their desire to testify by raising their hands, indicating it in the Q&A function, pressing *6 if you're on your phone, or emailing public testimony at newhavenct.gov. You could also text me at 203-843-8102. Any member of the public wishing to testify on this tentative agreement? And for a third time, would any member of the public wish to testify on this tentative agreement? Seeing none, let's move on to item 3, the year-long contract extension between the Board of Ed and CAPA. Mr. Lamb, are you our presenter on this one as well?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Please go ahead.
So CAPA, this agreement has been in place with the Board of Education for nearly 10 years. When I started in May, we've started a full review of all of our contracts just to make sure that they were compliant with all of the policies for purchasing across across all of the different areas that I supervise. And this one kind of fell through the cracks a little bit, and I do apologize for that. That's part of the reason that it is so late. However, this agreement has been active with the co-op high school since it was built in 2010. It's a long-standing agreement that we have with this party. There is a sole source. To my understanding, there is a sole source agreement in place for their services. So this is just an agreement for CAPA, which is the Connecticut Association of Performing Arts, to provide management services to the Cooperative Arts and Humanities School. They've been a proven partner in managing the needs of the performing arts space at the Co-op High School, and has demonstrated an ability to skillfully handle all of the school's needs, and to bring significant enrichment to the student body through partnership with the Schubert Theater. Part of the reason that this comes to you tonight is because of the requirement for agreements over $100,000 to be brought to this committee for approval and to the board. So that's all I have. The agreement is for $140,000, which is an increase over the $119,000 in the past. It maintained flat from 2015 to up until last year at $119,583. Part of the reasoning for the increases in operational costs and salaries related to the staffing, increased staffing needs of the program. At this time, we'll entertain any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. I see that 2 folks have been added to this panelist group, and I would invite them if they wanted to add anything. I see one is the principal of Co-op High School, at least that is her designation, and the other is associated with Kappa. It might be useful for the committee.
Absolutely.
To hear a little bit from them. Perhaps we can start with Principal Van Belton. Is that your name, ma'am?
Yes, good evening, board. I've been a principal of Co-op since 2015. The Kappa Schubert program.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but one thing we have to have folks do when they come on to publicly testify is to give their name and address for the record.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
That's
so
okay.
My name is Val Jean Belton. My address is 9 Thornridge Drive. It is in Hamden, Connecticut. Okay, I can continue. This is my first time here. As the principal of Co-op High School, as I stated, I've been the principal at Co-op High School since 2015. I was the assistant principal from 2012 until 2015. The Schubert program has been very instrumental for our school and our arts program. It has provided not only many artistic experiences for our students, but it has also allowed our students to engage in the Schubert as ushers and being part of their program as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that information. I see Ms. Wizzardo. Did you want to add to that? Name and address,
Sure.
please.
Sure. My name is Kelly Wizzardo. I'm the Director of Education and Engagement at the Schubert. I live at 1693 Quinnipiac Avenue in New Haven. So the Schubert also from the beginning of time, when we came with Kappa, we were doing a few shows, and now we do, it seems like a show every other day. So we've been able to help Co-op grow in their needs as they do more performances. Also, we do a job training program as part of this contract. So not everything that we do is based around education. So we don't just manage the spaces, we also manage rentals, but we teach the kids to do it with us because we want everything to be a learning experience. And then it becomes job training. So when we have an event, when there's a rental event, we're actually able to hire those students so they get paid to do this. So, and then when we do our summer camp, we are also a youth at work site. So we very much believe in this, not just being maintenance of the space in our job, but making it a training program and always educational for the children, high school students.
Thank you. So we're now going to proceed to questions from members of the committee, starting with Vice Chair Ronhart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being that my question, Ms. Rosado, thank you. You answered my question. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Alder Santiago.
No question at this time. Thank you.
Okay, Alder Morrison.
No question, Mr. Chair, but just a comment. The Kappa program, I love what they do with the children. They do so much in regards to the arts and really helping our children tap into themselves. You all know I got kids, and so my daughter was involved in one of those programs, and it's just so helpful. And I'm happy that our board is able to, provide whatever support, so hopefully that can continue with this, because when we, tap into those special things about our kids, that helps kids to stay focused. They stay focused, there's no problems. And so I truly just want to say that this is a great program, and thank you, Schubert. Thank you, Principal Belton, for all you guys do with all the children. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Alder Walker-Myers.
No questions at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one clarification. This also, I heard Ms. Wizzardo say that this includes also summer camp.
While we do our summer maintenance, we also have a summer camp. many years ago, there was an issue with co-op. When kids were applying to co-op, they were sort of randomly applying to co-op and not really sure what they were getting into. And so we heard that feedback from the teachers. And so we created, while we were there, a summer program for middle schoolers so they could get a taste of what co-op really is. Which I think in its own little way, I mean, it's still a lottery, but at any given time, we usually have at least a dozen former campers that are there. And then we're able to bring them back as paid teaching assistants. So it gives them a really good leg up for when they're going to enter co-op as high schoolers later. And obviously the summers when we get a lot of our maintenance and repairs and stuff done so that we're ready for students to come back in September.
Great. Thank you. And thanks for all the work you do with our students. The arts is very therapeutic. It's important for our kids who are interested in it to be a part of it. And Kappa helps us do that. So thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Alder Fairlow.
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
And thank you, sir. Alder Winter.
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Ms. Wizardo. Thank you, Principal Val Belton. And we're going to move now. Well, hold on. Let me first see if there any member of the public would like to give testimony on this item. Would any member of the public like to give testimony on this item? You may indicate your desire to testify by raising your hand, using the Zoom function, hitting the Q&A function and saying, please let me testify. You can text me at 203-843-8102. You may send me an email to publictestimony@newhavenct.gov. Would any member of the public wish to testify on this item? Seeing none, we're going to move on to item number 4, Board of Ed lease agreement with SP Ella.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe this is me as well.
And before you proceed, let me just make a quick comment that I appreciate that it's desirable for the members of the committee to offer brief comments to folks who've come to testify on a particular item. And of course, it's timely to do that when they're in front of us. But if we have more involved comments that we would like to make, we should save those for deliberations and try to stick to questions. Although it's always good to say a few quick, nice words to folks who are before us. So now we're moving to the next item. I'm not sure we'll have as much nice things to say about it. Let's see how this goes.
Yes, this has been a very difficult journey for me. So before you have a lease agreement with SP Ella LLC for our adult education department, which is at 580 El Abrazo Boulevard. This is a lease that has been in place for a very long time. I've done some research into the space, and it's actually been leased to the Board of Education since 1995. The district being in the school district being in a mission to find space for all of our programs in non-leased city-owned space. This is a difficult, when I came into the district, this was one of the larger items that had not really been looked at for long term. And this is myself, the Board of Education, as well as the superintendent, understand the need for these types of programs to be moved into space that is owned by the city, just from a financial planning point of view, as well as from a fiscal health point of view. We are moving to move all of our leased properties, leased programs into city-owned space. This program probably being one of the largest. I have been in working with Ms. Tony Walker, as well as the principal of the program, to look at space throughout the city where it may be possible to relocate this program. However, even under the best of circumstances, that process would take 2 to 3 years just for construction. We are looking at a space of 40,000 square feet that services a very large community of adult education students, with a new landlord or a new building owner in place who has very different ideas of how the building is managed and how the lease itself comes together than the previous building owner. And that's why we are where we are today. These negotiations took a considerable amount of time to come to an agreement that both parties can live with. In the past, this was a year-to-year lease. The new building owner, however, will not commit to a single year lease. He is looking for, him and his partners are looking for a multi-year agreement. There is a significant amount of repairs that need to be performed to the building, and those repairs, pending this agreement, have already started in some way, shape, or form. There's a lot of maintenance, building maintenance, and renovations to bring the building to a point where it is not only comfortable for the students and the staff, but also safe. There's some significant areas of water leaking and roof damage that needs to be repaired. There's HVAC that we're looking that needs to be repaired, along with carpets that may have some damage to them from previous building leaks. And I've been working with the new owners to get those issues resolved. And as part of this, they have made a commitment to do that. And it also comes with an allowance that our district can use to make repairs or modifications to the space that we feel is necessary, not just what is needed for the building. So if we have something that we need to modify, adding a bathroom or looking at some modifications that are specific to our needs, then there's an allowance within this lease to do that. So the lease term is for the 3 years and 9 months, which takes us from October of 2021 through June of 25. There are escalating rates starting at $16.50 per square foot, escalating up to $18 a square foot, with a 90-day out during the last year of the contract. This way, for any reason, if during the last year we are able to come up with a space that is suitable for us to move, and we are able to move into that space, we can terminate our agreement with this landlord. That way, there's no penalty or anything like that if we provide that notice. What else? In the previous lease agreements, the taxes and cleaning costs were paid for by the district. And in the current lease, or in the proposed lease, those costs, or the costs for property taxes, would be paid for by the building owner instead of being paid for by the school district. Additionally, we would be able to manage the cleaning services ourselves, and that would give us a little bit greater control over what was being done, how it was being done, what products were being used. And if there was a situation where we needed to provide additional services or reevaluate what was being done, we could do that versus having the landlord do that. And I believe that is it. Is there anything that you want to add, Mike?
Sure. So one of the things that I'm going to add on to what Mr. Lamb said was, just so everyone is aware, the funding source for a majority of this agreement is from adult education. So we receive a grant from the state of Connecticut for about $2.8 million. As Mr. Lamb said, the only general fund costs was really when we had to reimburse for cleaning fees and property taxes. So with this being a straight lease and not a lot of reimbursables listed in it, the funding is strictly coming from adult education, unless something else comes up that is not eligible under the adult education grant. But we foresee this just being strictly lease payments. Do I have that correct, Mr. Lamb?
Yes.
All right. So again, we get about $2.8 million from the state, where the increase in this lease cost will be absorbed within the grant that we already get for adult education. So with that, Mr. Chair, I believe we are all set.
Thank you, gentlemen, for your presentation. We'll now move to questions from members of the committee, starting with Vice Chair Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Lamb and Mr. Gormley, for your presentation on this item. I just have two questions, if I may, please. One would be, how much is the lease agreement and per year? And second question would be, are we, meaning the Board of Ed, in the process of looking for that space that we need?
So allow me to answer that question first.
Okay.
Yes, we are looking for a new space. I'm working with Giovanni and his staff to locate. We think we have found a suitable space that may be able to be renovated into what is needed. Nothing has been finalized yet. We're still looking at programmatically if the space will work, but we're almost there. As far as the individual year costs of the lease, so year one has a cost of $660,000. Year two is $680,000. Year two is $700,000, and year three is $720,000.
Thank you, Mr. Lamb. Definitely, we need to really
Absolutely
get out of this property. It's like they raping us blind.
They are.
Here. And it's not a good feeling for our city. We have so many other services that need to be that's needed in our communities. So thank you for that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. Next, we'll hear from Alder Santiago.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, let me see if I get this correctly. So altogether for the 3 years, it'll be around 2.6 millions, right? Is that
Yes.
correct? Okay, now we get around 2.8 from the state for adult education. Is that yearly or is that every?
So the program,
That's,
the program
sorry, go ahead.
reapplies, yeah, the program reapplies to the state for funding every year. And you put into your application how much your property space is. And
So I mean,
that's,
So yes,
the answer.
yes, Alder Santiago, we've been receiving the adult education funding per year. So
Per
if
year,
everything
okay.
goes planned, it's 2.8 million per year, unless something changes with the state or whatever the case is.
So if I see this correctly, with 1 year from the grant will cover the whole 3 years. I mean, am I
Correct. That's how the lease has been funded in the past, is with adult education funds. So when they do the application, as Mr. Lamb was saying, the cost of the lease is within that application
Yeah, I just want to
for
make sure.
funding.
Yeah. All right, that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Santiago. We'll now move to Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I just have one question in regards to the type of notice. I noticed, Mr. Lamb, you said that with this agreement, we basically, once we find a place, we can just leave. But we all know with any type of rental of anything or any type of agreement, they're going to need something, a month, 6 months, 2 weeks. I know something has to be written because
there's a 90 days is what
Okay.
is written into the lease. And that is only
So,
for
Alder Morrison,
only for the last year.
Okay.
Yep, only within the last year we can invoke that 90-day clause. So it would be, in this case, fiscal year 24-25 is the year that we can invoke that 90-day clause if we found property.
So if we were just blessed and a property just fell on our heads that was the best next year, we can't leave?
Unfortunately not. And the likelihood that is going to happen, I would pray that it would. But
Prayer works, Mr. Lamb.
I pray that it does. I really do. But I realistically, that's not something that we see.
Right. No, and I just wanted to, on the record because I mean, you never know. I mean, different places that you're looking at now, you probably never thought that was a reality, and prayer works. So you never know. But for us, just so that we know, regardless of what you found.
Given the amount of capital that the building owner is putting into the building, it's just it's a balance of how much he's willing to put into the building versus how long I can get him to be able to say, okay, well, you've stayed long enough for us to recoup what we've invested into the building. Now it's okay that you can go.
Okay. All right. So we have to wait basically 3 years and and a half, or give or take, and then we can invoke to say, okay, we want to leave, and there won't be a cost. Okay. And because in your testimony, it sounded as though you said that with this agreement that, we could just leave.
No, and I apologize if that's the way it sounded, but that's not it's just 90 days in the last year of the agreement.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Alder Walker-Myers.
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple of questions. First, who is behind the SPL LLC?
I only know the gentleman that I've been working with.
Who is not the owner, though?
He's part of the group. It's a group of people. I'm not sure exactly who it is. I
Okay.
believe it's Manny, but I'm not positive. I know where
Thank
you're going with that.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I am very concerned as to who will monitor the repairs that are going to be done.
I will personally.
Okay, so we
And
can hold you liable.
yeah, I don't know, hold me liable.
Counting
but
on you.
I will do the best I can to make sure that everything that has been agreed upon is completed.
Okay, because that's important. We're spending a lot of money here, and it's really taking advantage of the city, quite honestly. Can you mentioned that the 2.8 grant is from the state. What does that include? I'm assuming that includes all the overhead.
That's the entire program is in its entirety. The principal and her staff work out a program budget that includes the space, teachers, overhead, everything.
Okay, and just clarification on one thing, the managing of the cleaning services, we're going to manage it ourselves, but they're paying, or who pays for that?
We would need to pay for that. It's part of it would become absorbed into the Board of Education custodial contracts.
Okay, so they would do
so we would add an additional person and create the program within that space.
Okay, and then you mentioned, this will be my last question, what is the going rate in the area per square foot in other buildings?
It ranges. It's dependent upon what kind of space it is, what class of space it is. So there's really not a comparable building in that area of the city. But when you look at on Long Wharf, which really you can't compare the two because they're totally different types of buildings, they're upwards of $27 a square foot on Long Wharf. So are we less? Yes. Are we where I would like to be? No.
And like you said, it's two different areas. We really can't compare the two.
There's not really a good comparison when you look at the building type, the building construction, the building condition, along with the building use. There's nothing in the area to compare it to. So it's more what the market will bear. And that's really when it comes down to negotiations between the Board of Education and the building owner, where we land.
Well, let's work really hard in finding a facility that we own, that we can refurbish with that money versus handing it out.
I would much rather maintain a building within the city than pour money into something that I don't own.
Mm-hmm. Agree. Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Alder Furlong. He had to step away. Alder Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We received your memo about this, Mr. Lamb, but we didn't actually receive the contract itself. Are you confident that the base building work that's detailed in the contract covers all of the repairs that need to be made?
Yes, I'm confident. At least the repairs that will bring the building to a level that we can stay in it for the length of our lease.
And I think if I understood Mr. Gormany correctly, you were saying that you anticipate these increased costs to be borne by the state, and that there are a couple pieces that the city was bearing with the property taxes in particular that we would no longer be directly responsible for. Is that right?
Correct. I think, as Mr. Lamb mentioned, some of the cleaning fees, which again, as he mentioned, is being absorbed so we can manage it better in our cleaning contract. And one of the bigger items was property taxes. So within the previous leases, whatever the property assessment was for that particular parcel with the landlord, the city would be responsible for those taxes. So essentially, we would have to go into our tax system and adjust the bill from, I believe the last tax bill was around 150,000, maybe somewhere around there.
128.
And we'd have to, 128, thank you. So we'd have to go in and adjust that tax bill because per the lease, we were responsible. So now the owner is paying the tax bill themselves as part of the new lease that would be approved.
And so it seems like really the state and the adult debt are it's them who are really being taken advantage of by these contractual increases. It's going to eat away at their budget and their programming. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Winter. So we have come to the end of committee questions for Mr. Lamb. I'm going to ask, and Mr. Gormany, I'm going to ask if there are any members of the public who wish to testify on this or any of the prior three items. My understanding is that Mr. Lamb has another meeting to run off to. So if a member of the public would like to testify about any of the four items we have already heard, we can hold Mr. Lamb another moment if there's some issue that comes up that he would need to address. So members of the public may indicate that they wish to testify by raising their hands using the Zoom function, indicating in the Q&A that they wish to testify. They may text me at 203-843-8102. They may email public testimony at newhavenct.gov. Any members of the public wishing to testify on this item or the three prior items? And for a third and final time, would any member of the public wish to testify on this item or any of the three prior items? Seeing none, I want to thank you, Mr. Lamb, for being with us this evening. I understand that you do have another meeting to go to, a Board of Education
Yes, thank you very much.
And so if a question comes up later on, it'll be Mr. Gormany who will have to
Thank you very much, Mr.
do his
Chair.
best.
Before Mr. Lamb leaves, Mr. Chair, if I can just add one thing
Please.
to the lease. I believe in the package that you had, the language about the clause, the 90-day clause was incorrect. So just so the committee members know, I will submit to yourself through you and legislative services the correct language regarding the 90-day termination in the final year.
Thank you for that, Mr. Gormany. That would be helpful. Okay, we're going to move on with our agenda. Good evening, Mr. Lamb.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I appreciate your time, and I look forward to doing work together again in the future.
Take care. We're now moving to item number 5, which is an ordinance amendment to reclassify an open position in the Department of Vital Statistics. Mr. Gormany, I think you have the floor.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe Brooke Logan, our Deputy Director of Health, is also in the queue in case there are any questions after
Mr. Lucas or Mr. Hayden, if you could promote Ms. Logan, that would be very helpful. And there he is.
So Michael Gormany, 45 Jefferson Road, Branford, Connecticut. So thank you, committee members, Mr. Chair, for hearing this item. This is an ordinance amendment to one of the vital statistic positions, processing clerk within the office. In December, we submitted an ordinance amendment changing 2 vacant positions to assistant registrar or assistant registrar bilingual, which was approved by this board. So thank you for that. What happened afterwards was there was a sudden retirement of the 3rd processing clerk, which is why we did not include the change in the previous ordinance amendment. So what we are asking for is for continuity of the office, and as in previous testimony, for these positions to assist the registrar of vital statistics in signature of documents and performing other essential duties in assisting the registrar right now. We are asking for this third position to also be changed to an assistant registrar of vital stats or assistant registrar bilingual. Again, we're saying either or of the title. And the reason we're saying either or is because with the last change a few months ago, we did begin the civil service process in hiring those positions. So we did post two positions, an assistant registrar and an assistant registrar bilingual. So depending on the outcome of those civil service tests, we'll determine which type of position that we have for this third vacancy. So that is why the order is written assistant registrar of vital statistics or bilingual if needed. But again, this is coming strictly because the retirement happened January 31st of 2022. It was very little notice that was given on the retirement. So again, that is the reason that it was not included when there were two other vacancies prior. Brooke, do you want to add anything?
I think you covered it, but Brooke Logan, 96 Village Lane, Branford, Connecticut. Just to reiterate what Michael had said, it's to align with the other two positions in the office that have been changed to assistant registrars for signing documents, administering the marriage oath, and being able to assist with some state required reports.
All right, so with that, Mr. Chair, I believe that concludes our presentation for that item.
Thank you so much. Alder Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Gormady. Will this position be an increase in pay rate?
Thank you for that. I did forget to mention that during my presentation, so thank you for that reminder. This position, we are not asking for a transfer or anything related to salaries because this position will be hired in line with the other two positions. And we are not asking for a transfer because vital stats is part of the health department. And there is lapsed salary within the health department that would cover any potential increase in the salary of this particular position, whether it's due to bargaining unit promotional rules or whatever the case is when the civil service testing process is completed. But again, we have, 23 nursing vacancies, more vacancies than I wish we had in the health department, and I'm sure Brooke would concur as well. But we have more than enough lapsed salary during this fiscal year to cover any small increase that may happen.
Thank you, Mr. Gormady. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. Alder Santiago.
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, colleague. Alder Morrison.
No questions at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Walker Myers.
No questions at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification, how many registrars do we have, assistant registrars do we have currently?
So the vital stats office consisted of 4 positions previous, the registrar and then 3 clerks. So in the previous order, we changed 2 of the 3 clerk positions to assistant registrars, and this will actually change the 3rd position to an assistant registrar. So the office would be made up of a registrar and 3 assistant registrars if this board and the full board were to approve this order.
Okay, and the difference between the clerks and the assistant registrar is that they can sign off on the documents?
Correct.
Correct. I'm sorry, Brooke, go ahead.
I was just going to say, per state regulations, only registrars or assistant registrars are allowed to sign certain documents and administer the marriage oath. So the processing clerks were not able to fulfill those duties. So by having the 3 assistant registrars in the office, it will ensure that continuity of services should the registrar be out.
Okay, so I guess you guys are really busy. If we need all.
Yep.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Alder Furlow. Okay, Alder Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gormany. Thank you, Ms. Logan, for being with us. Before you run off, let me first ask if there are any members of the public who wish to testify on this item, the proposed reclassification of a position in vital statistics. Members of the public may indicate that they wish to testify by raising their hands, using the Q&A function to send us a quick heads up, emailing public testimony at newhavenct.gov, or texting me, the chair, at 203-843-8102. Any member of the public wishing to testify on this item. And for a third time, any member of the public wishing to testify on this proposed reclassification. Seeing none, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda. Thank you, Ms. Logan. This is item 6, the proposed increase in the maximum expenditure authorized on CESCO, the provider of trash and recycling toters. I believe we have representatives from Public Works who are joining us. Here comes Director Pesco.
All right. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Michael Gormley, 45 Jefferson Road, and I am joined by the Parks and Public Works Director, Mr. Jeff Pescasolito.
Good evening. There we go. We're coming live from 34 Middletown Avenue. I'm sorry. Jeff Pescasolito, good evening, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and committee members. Jeff Pescasolito, Parks and Public Works. My address is 595 Whitney Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut. And with me tonight is Mr. Mark DiCola. Go ahead, Mark.
Mark DiCola, 165 Townsend Avenue, CFO for Parks and Public Works.
Thank you again.
All right.
You want to go ahead, Mike, or you?
Yeah, I'll start it off, sure.
Okay, thank you.
So what we're looking for with this order is to increase the current contract that we have with CESCO, which provides our Parks and Public Works Department with toters. We do have a sole source based on an RFP that was done previous for this vendor. The reason we're before this board is because the contract for fiscal year 21-22 will exceed $100,000. One of the things that is not in the order, but I want to mention to the board is we're actually looking at to increase the contract to about $225,000 for fiscal year 21-22. So Parks and Public Works is before the board because this sole source vendor will exceed the $100,000 threshold per the city charter. And just so this board knows, which Mr. DiCola may go into a little bit more, is we are looking at doing another RFP going into fiscal year 23 for these services. So I will turn it over to Mr. DiCola and Mr. Pescasolito.
Sure, just a little bit of a history. The city of New Haven, we initially started the toter program back in the year 2004 as an introductory. Approximately 1.5 million was spent, and then in 2010 we completed the placement of toters for all residents in the city of an additional $1.7 million. So that brought us up to about $3.2 million, supplying the city's residents with the toters, the recycling blue toters, and the brown toters are the municipal solid waste. So toter is actually a brand name, but it's easier for us to refer to it that way. And then since then, in the years up to 2022, we spent, the city, the department, has spent an additional approximately $660,000 for replacement toters, and that is due to damaged toters, stolen toters, or lost toters. We currently have a backlog of requests to the department, about 3 months worth of requests that we've received, numbering approximately 300 toters. We have a small supply here at 34 Middletown Avenue. We would like to supplement that so we can continue to provide these toters to our residents so they can put their recycling, their trash out in proper containers. The containers are important because it does help keep our city clean. We have other issues with, the recycling we know about and some other MSW challenges ahead of us. But for the purposes of tonight, it's just clearly so we can get some more toters to our residents. I think Mark has some financial information for you tonight. And if you have any other questions on the collection system, please feel free to ask away. But go ahead, Mark.
Good evening, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. Just to give you a little, what Mike was talking about, the 2.25 costs. At this moment, this time for this year, we have spent up to 100,000. That's why we're hitting this threshold of presenting ourselves to you tonight. We spend on an average anywhere from, say, 60,000 up to $100,000 a year since this program has been in existence since 2004. With that said, what we're asking tonight is for 125,000, and that will cover for the next go around to replace, and as Jeff said, the ones that are damaged and stolen. Again, speaking to the vendor that's a sole source, the purpose of this purchase also, as everyone knows with COVID, a lot of cost of goods have been increased with plastic, with steel, and with gasoline going up prices. Everything is going up. So we're trying to get a savings now before the next year. And then we're going to put it back out to bid, as Michael said earlier, to see if we could find a better source, or that's a discussion down the road we can come together. But this vendor that we're using is the state of Connecticut's sole source vendor for this company. That's why we use them, and that's why we call it a sole source. So with that said, I think we covered pretty much everything else. I'll put it back to the floor, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, gentlemen. Unless there's any further comments from city staff, we'll move now to questions from the committee, starting with Vice Chair Ron Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have one question. What is the total amount of these totals? How many can this requested amount get the city?
The purchase for the 125,000?
Yes.
Yes.
So $125,000, well, it equates to around 900 toters. We found that over the last few purchases and watching our residents and the shift in the needs of our residents, originally we came out with a smaller 48-gallon brown toters for the residents. And we're finding that that's not efficient. So we switched it up, and we're buying a little bit mixture of the 96-gallon brown, continuing with a 96-gallon blue and a smaller brown. It'll get us about 900 toters, plus or minus.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. We'll move now to Alder Santiago.
No, that was exactly what I was going to ask, but thank you. No other questions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Alder Morrison.
Yes, I do have one question. In regards to these toters, I don't have a toter. I live in a condo complex. So in regards to these toters, what is the life of a toter? Like if I had my own house, and I know the city provides these toters, the blue and the brown, how often do you change those out? Do I get a new one every year? Do I get it every 2-3 years? Is that the reason? Is that a part of the reason why, outside of inflation and everything else going up, is that a part of the reason why we're exceeding this amount? And as Mr. Gorman said, you guys are going to be asking for a lot more in the next budget cycle for these toters. So I'm just wondering, how long do they last? When are they changed out?
The current company, the toter organization, provides an 18-year warranty to the city of New Haven with the toters. Most of our toters are damaged, they're lost or stolen, but let's face it, we do have some issues with some small animals, mostly squirrels, that are chewing holes. So do we go out and have a regularly scheduled replacement program? We do not. So it's all on demand from our city residents.
Okay, so if you had to, I guess, look at it over the last year, did you find that you're replacing a lot of these toters, and maybe not over the last year, I guess maybe during COVID, is there a need to replace or to increase those size of the toters as you talked about, Mr. Director?
Yeah, that's a very key point. What we're finding out due to COVID and the numbers that the weights going out of the Solid Waste Authority, the transfer station, have increased tremendously. So that's one of the reasons why we increased the size on our brown toters, the trash toters. So definitely we've looked into that, and we've increased, the purchases of that 96 gallon. But I think over the last few years, we have seen a number of our toters disappear. And it's amazing, the adjacent municipalities, we do get calls every once in a while, and we will send a vehicle over and we'll find toters, and we will retrieve those toters and bring them back and reuse them here in New Haven. We also recondition toters as well. So if there is a toter that has a lid that's broken or chewed, there's holes chewed through it through animals, wheels are broken, we do repair those, which will save us some money at the same time.
Okay, and then my last question, Mr. Chair, in regards to these toters, because as we know, they get real nasty, like smelly, dirty. And so are you going, because you just said that you don't have this like program of recycling, are there plans to do something like that? Because again, it speaks to the dirt, it speaks to the environment and all of that, because I have seen some toters that look like they need to just go back to the company or do something with them. And so are there plans to do that type of recycling of these toters?
We could look at that. Again, if a resident did request and there was a situation, we would replace that toter. And the toters that do come back, if they can be reconditioned, we will put those back into service. If they cannot, we do have the outfit that supplies the city Sesco. They will take those toters back and give us a credit. But if a resident does have a need for a new toter, we would look at that and take that into consideration. The problem is we cannot clean those on the street. We'd have to bring those back to our facility, and the water, of course, is treated and discharged accordingly.
Okay, and residents do know that they can call to get a replacement, right?
Yes, they can, and that's on our website. That is correct. And other municipalities do charge. There is a fee that is charged. New Britain, Hartford, Waterbury, they do charge services for replacements and servicing.
Thank you. I believe that was my fourth question. I never did that before, Mr. Chair, so thank you.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Alder Walker Myers.
No questions here. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do have a couple, although Jeff, thanks, Mr. Piscicilio, thanks for answering my recyclable. It sounds like you do pick up broken toters and try to fix them, and we do recycle ones that aren't. you mentioned other towns charging? Do we have like repeat addresses that need replacement? And if so, are we able to charge those residents if they're consistently calling for new toters? I don't know what the percentage is of missing versus stolen versus broken.
That is something that we do record. All toter deliveries are recorded here at Public Works. We can get back to you with that information. I'm sure there are locations in the city that are abused. I think originally when we started the program, we encouraged residents to call up New Haven Police. Let's face it, they're too busy. They don't need to be bothered with Public Works and our toter problem. But I think it's something we should investigate and look at that. And again, something we would review with the Board of Alders.
Okay, thank you. And as far as the care and maintenance of the toter, if it's in good shape, this is a follow-up to Alder Morrison's question about cleaning it. If residents do clean it out, is that against ordinance? Should they not be cleaning them out? Or can they clean them out if they start to stink?
It's a good question, but again, I think what we do not want to promote is people washing those toters and then bringing them out to the curb, dumping it into the gutter of the road, and then the waters in turn go into the streams and then into the sound. There are ways to clean them in your own yards, and the ground would actually act as a filter. But if they were real bad, of course, we're going to assist our residents. We always do. And the water up at our refuse facility goes through a process where it's treated before it does enter the waterways.
Excuse me, Alder Festa?
Yes.
This is Murphy Cola. Sometimes we'll get a phone call from seniors. Again, seniors have limit liability on how they move, and they're picking a hose up or leaning over to clean these. So when we get that call, we will send somebody out to take that bin away and give them another bin, and then wash that one up and use it to another resident.
Okay, so that's good. That's another way that we're recycling them.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're
Thank you,
welcome.
Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Festa. I know that Alder Fertile had to step away for a moment. Alder Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Following up on the last couple questions, do we have a breakdown of how many are damaged versus stolen, or what the fate of these toters is?
No, we don't have an actual count. It's something we could probably provide you with if we did some more research, but the majority of them are missing toters. They're not damaged, they are missing.
Okay. And of the increased cost, how much of it is due to getting larger? Sounds like some of the increased cost is getting larger toters for trash, but do you know how much of the 125,000 is for increasing the size of the toters?
Well, for example, the smaller toters are at $77, and the larger toters right now are at $82. So you're looking at a $5 difference or $7 difference, give or take. And that's because the vendor is trying to help us out as much as he can to save us money.
So the unit prices per toters, the 96 brown and the 96 blue are the same price. It's just that the quantity of the larger toters we're going, of course, we've increased that quantity. So yes, if we went with the 48s, the smaller size brown, we would get more toters. I believe that's what your question was.
How large is the backlog of toter requests in terms of number of toters? And will this cover it?
Time-wise, we're about 3 months backlogged, and it's approximately 300 requests.
And you mentioned the possibility of issuing an RFP to look at changing the vendor. Is that something we've begun work on, or that's something we're going to look at in the next fiscal year?
We're going to start working on that in the next month. to put something together for next year. That's correct.
Thanks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Winter. I have a couple of questions. Do you have some analysis or some sense of what has given rise to an increased number of missing toters? And what steps do you plan to take to try to reduce this incidence of missing toters, or what might be put in place to curb the tide of toter theft or toter migration or whatever the thing may be?
I think one area that, you know, we tried to bring back a couple positions, and the alders are very supportive of it, is our public space division. I think by the public space inspectors now being more visible, you know, again, it's a large city for one individual to cover. We have 3 positions, and there's more of a focus now of getting residents to bring their toters off the city right of way back onto private property. So we think that will assist in the lost toter category. As far as numbers, yeah, I don't know, you know, what we have outstanding on that area, what we could do to figure that out. But again, we do try to track everything and log everything in VOG and C-Click Fix. Possibly we can get you more information on that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. And the item before us tonight is to authorize your department to make this purchase or to make purchases above the maximum amount. But of course, there's no transfer here because this is a capital expense, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then my last question is about perhaps an unintended consequence of moving to our larger trash toter, although perhaps it's an unintended consequence of having a smaller trash toter in the first place, which I recall Rob Smuts, our former CAO, years ago, explaining to us that the reason between the reason for the size differential, smaller trash barrels, larger recycling barrels, was to try to encourage people to recycle more and to throw out trash less. Trash which we incinerate turns into toxins in the environment, recycling which hopefully gets recycled. Of course, I've seen lots of recycling barrels just used as trash barrels because people still create a lot of trash. What is your thought about what the effect on the recycling program might be of removing that size difference between the barrels?
I think the studies when we initiated this program was about 75% of material being thrown out to be disposed of should or could be classified as recyclable. We in New Haven, and I don't think the country is anywhere near it. I think I think in some areas you may see 25%. I think we're down in the low teens right now. I think the education portion, and again, we'll through our public space and other, you know, agencies in the city, we need to improve on that. But we're not going to get away from recycling. We do promote recycling. I think the whole industry is going to be changing over the next few years. We may even see another toter coming out for food waste, things of that nature. Currently, it's a good investment to keep our city clean. A lot of households nowadays are bringing in, because of COVID and other reasons, we're seeing that the household with, the families have increased in size, and that's why we see the need for the larger brown toters. We're going to continue to monitor it. I think currently the money is well spent, and it will help promote a clean city. And then if the pendulum swings back to better recycling, then we'll switch over back to these smaller brown toters. But again, it's something for discussion. I think as we watch the whole industry, the state change, the burn plants change, it's a focus we really have to look at as a city of New Haven.
Thank you, Director Pesco-Salido. I'm now going to ask if any member of the public would like to testify on this item. Would any member of the public wish to testify on this request to increase the authorization for the maximum expenditure on this item, the toters. And of course, members of the public may indicate that they wish to testify by raising their hands or using the Q&A function to get our attention, or to email public testimony@newhavenct.gov, or text me, the chair, at 203-843-8102. Any member of the public wishing to testify on this item, and for a third time, at least a third time, would any member of the public wish to testify on this item? Seeing none, we're going to move forward with the next item on our agenda. Thank you to Director Pesco-Salido and Mr. DeCola for your presentation and your answering our questions. Mr. Gormany, I think you have another team joining you for this item, probably from Public Safety.
Yes, sir. I believe in the queue is Alyssa Epson, our Supervisor of Management Services, CAO Regina Rush-Kittle, Interim Chief Dominguez is here, and Assistant Chief Carl Jacobson is here.
And Mr. Gormany, perhaps you can help us out by just reminding us at the outset, what is this item and how does it relate to a related item that we saw back in the fall? I just want to make sure we understand exactly what we're approving versus what has already been approved, if you know what I mean.
Yes, sir. I believe still in the attendees, Mr. Lucas or Mr. Hayden is CAO Rush-Kittle. There we go. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I believe we have everyone from the team and Mr. Teachman as well. So I will just begin, and I believe everyone can give their name and address as they begin to speak, if that's okay with you, Mr. Chair. All right, perfect.
Thanks.
So before you, you have a 4-year agreement with ShotSpotter Inc. in the amount of $1,676,919, which is to expand and provide gun detection software. So this was part of what this committee had heard back in November related to the American Rescue Plan. So back in November, the committee heard a $12 million plan, which included camera, firewall, cybersecurity, overtime, and ShotSpotter as well. During that time, the administration was in the process of submitting the multi-year agreement as well, which was, I believe, submitted in December. And again, because there was no committee hearings in January related to the multi-year agreement, this is now before this committee. But this multi-year agreement is directly related to the American Rescue Plan. Within that $12 million package, there was there was an allocation for ShotSpotter within that $12 million that related directly to this item that you have before you. So what we're doing is related to the American Rescue Plan. We are paying for the 4 years of this order in front of you from the American Rescue Plan. Again, the $1.6 million is all 4 years combined. So, and Ms. Epson can correct me when she gets to the presentation, but I believe it's about $446,000 a year, or close to that number, for the increased detection software in ShotSpotter. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will turn it over to Chief Dominguez and her team.
Good evening, everyone. Renee Dominguez, Interim Police Chief, 1 Union Avenue, New Haven, Connecticut. So we do have a short PowerPoint. Alyssa and I like to do PowerPoints. It's only 4 slides just to kind of help visualize what we're going to discuss with the 4-year contract. So if I could just have screen share.
Thank you, Chief. And as you are getting ready to show the presentation, if you would definitely point out any differences between the information you're presenting now versus the information you've already presented on this topic. Something may have changed, for example.
Absolutely. So this is the 4-year contract. We have estimated dates just for the presentation from March 1st, 2022 through February 28th, 2026. This contract will include, the cost includes our existing 5.5 square mile annual subscription and fee renewals, and then the additional 1.56 expansion service initiation, and then the annual subscription fees. ShotSpotter, I just gotta move you guys up to my other side. ShotSpotter has been providing services for the city of New Haven since 2009. We've had a couple expansions over the years. This would be our third expansion. It detects and locates and alerts police to gunfire, and it alerts New Haven Police Department to gunfire that may have otherwise gone unreported. It improves response time to gunfire incidents and also to exact locations, and provides information that assists in evidence collection. So this is the proposed expansion coverage. So if you look at this red outline, this red outline is inside of this is where we already have ShotSpotter, our 5.5 square miles. We use the heat maps that you'll see on the left to determine where we were going to expand ShotSpotter, and that is A, B, C, and D. Again, if you look at the left, you'll see where we have the red heat sources here, and that's with an increase in homicides, assaults with firearm, and confirmed gunshots. And while obviously this section here is of the heat map indicates a lot of these incidents, that is already included in what we have 5.5 square miles of the city. This slide shows, just for a frame of reference, everything outside of our current coverage. However, even with it being outside our coverage, we are still able to get alerts from ShotSpotter because we're close enough to it. So it's showing you how many more shots fired that it is picking up, even though it's outside our coverage. They're not reviewed because it's outside our coverage, so the officers are just going there. But many of the areas that you're seeing here will be within the expansion. And you can see this section over here, Fairhaven, that is one of the sections, that's section D. So that is I'm gonna stop share for a minute. Those are the 4 slides related. Oh wait, there might be one more after that. Alyssa, I have one more at the end, right? You're muted, but I think
it should be showing the breakdown of cost.
Yeah, sorry. So the 4-year contract cost estimate, a little over 1.6 million. And the contract period, again, as we showed in the beginning, from March 1st, 2022 to February 28th, 2026. And the approved ARPA funds for ShotSpotter are 1.2 million. So we do understand that our regular general funds will be what bridges that gap of difference there. And the ARPA expenditure period aligns with our contract period, and there is a section, the end of 25 into 26 would not be within that period, but we are already preparing and assuming the difference. So what we have 2 notes here that we can go in, but we did negotiate a contract with ShotSpotter for 4 years, which gave us a savings of $123,000 for doing a 4-year contract, and they waived the $15,600 service initiation fee and the $107,000 1-year subscription fee for the expansion. So with that, I do have more information that I know has been desired and talked about with ShotSpotter, but I want to make sure that I allow the alders to question anything on the finance part of it and the contract part of it, and then I will be glad to answer some questions as it relates to statistics And I have just a couple of examples of how in the recent past, 2019, 2020, 2021, what ShotSpotter has done for us in terms of linking incidents that were not called into the police department, only given to us via ShotSpotter activation, and how we were able to make some significant arrests.
So Chief Dominguez, I appreciate your concise presentation. I think what you just mentioned goes to the question of, is this do we get a good yield on the money that we would spend? And so I think if you have a couple of examples now would be a good time to hear them.
Wonderful. So the city is currently 20.14 square miles and our coverage is 5.5 square miles. Uncovered currently is a little over 14.5 square miles. So with the expansion, we're looking to cover 7.7 square miles. So in 2019, August of 2021, ShotSpotter alerted to the area of Washington West for multiple rounds fired. 19 shell casings were located. The ShotSpotter alert led to the arrest of 4 people for criminal attempt first. This incident was not called in, and we would not have made the arrest in this incident had it not been for the ShotSpotter activation. There also in 2021, ShotSpotter alerted to 2 rounds at 335 Winthrop Avenue, and this alert led to another arrest for criminal attempt assault first. In 2019, ShotSpotter was instrumental in making for the Detective Bureau in developing probable cause for an assault 1 arrest of an individual. We had contacted ShotSpotter in helping us secure an arrest warrant. And the representatives from ShotSpotter detected 2 significant volleys of shots, which were able to prove that there were 2 shooters present during the incident. They provided expert analysis in articulating why the facts and circumstances of this investigation fit to the video surveillance and physical evidence on scene. And they were able to provide expert testimony in case this were to go to trial. This is just one of the many cases that where ShotSpotter has really been instrumental in helping to develop a case further for the Detective Bureau. And then in the initial example where shots were not called in and we were able to make an arrest, and we potentially would have never been notified to that or been able to kind of piece it together and make a significant arrest. It also helps us link to the shell casings we find on scene because we're accurately finding them. We have the officers get the alerts on their phone, dispatch gets the alerts, the supervisors get the alerts on their desktop, and they're able to see with like a Google map exactly where. So they're able to walk down a street and they know it's going to be behind 1 Union Avenue. To the right, there's a dumpster, and they're able to locate shell casings. Taking these shell casings to be able to further conduct tests on them, it allows us to link these shell casings, not just to other New Haven cases, to cases all over the state. And we have numerous examples of where we're working currently cases where our shell casings are also coming back to Bridgeport and to a couple other cities and towns within Connecticut. And that is going to help us be able to better work together because we are always collaborating with our partners just to be able to see what are these trends and how can we not just solve our crime, but solve some crime that some individuals are going, are spreading out throughout the state. So it's just, we do feel that it's very valuable, and we feel that expanding it and adding more square mileage to what we currently have will only help us in our investigations on the patrol level and also in the investigation unit.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Gormany, do you have anything to add, or perhaps our CAO would want to chime in at this point?
No, I think from the fiscal standpoint, again, you know, for the first 4 years, we are using ARPA funding up to $1.2 million. Again, we already paid for ShotSpotter in previous years from general fund. So I think once the ARPA funding, you know, runs out, we'll just have to adjust what we have in a future budget that we were paying from general fund with the new amount for general fund in a 4-year period. So that's all I have, unless Ms. Rush-Kittle has anything to add.
No, Mr. Gormany, I think Chief Dominguez has covered it well. We went over today what needed to be discussed during this call tonight, and I think she has covered it well. and is prepared if there are any further questions from any of the alders.
Thank you, Ms. Rush Kittle. And although it may sound silly for me to ask this, I need your name and address for the record, even though you've said a brief statement.
Okay, I'm sorry. Regina Rush Kittle, and my address is 26 Priya Drive, Rocky Hill, Connecticut.
Thank you so much. So now we will move to questions from members of the committee, starting with Vice Chair Ron Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief Dominguez. I have maybe one or two questions. Do you see another plan? Is there another plan for expansion of the shot spotters and cost effectiveness after the 4 years that the American Rescue Plan runs out, the money runs out? Do you see a cost increase? Do you foresee a cost increase?
So I'll take your question out of order. So there will be a cost increase. We currently pay about $350,000 just to round, and it would go up to an increase to about $446,000. We are aware of that. We are able to support ShotSpotter in our current budget. So we would make sure that in 4 years that we would plan appropriately to be able, if we were unable to get additional grant funding, to be able to support it on our own without, as we've been doing since 2009. I don't believe that we've had any assistance in the past with paying for ShotSpotter. So in a perfect world, if that's something, having an expansion of ShotSpotter just is a greater tool. I realize that if you were to, it might not be something that we're able to get the entire city covered just because of the amount that it would cost per square mile with having, 14 square miles in the city. So it would really pretty much double our current cost to be, if everything were equal, maybe $900,000. So that is something that maybe the police department can't, at least this point, support financially. So that would be the drawback of it, and making sure that it's not something that that we can support on our own, and not relying on grant funding to do so.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. Can you just answer as why is there a time press for this item?
I don't think that Mr. Gormany, maybe a little bit better. We want to be able to move forward with beginning this process of installation. We did have back in 2021 is when I negotiated the contract with them. And then just the way schedules happen with the board to not be meeting is why it's on here now. Mr. Gormany?
Yeah, I think Chief Dominguez said it, Vice Chair Hurt. I think, we started this process prior, had to hear the American Rescue Plan to finish negotiating the actual agreement. And basically the vendor has been working with us to hold the pricing so that way we can, execute this 4-year contract. But again, as we need Board of Alder approval. So as Chief Dominguez said, we want to work on getting this project up and running with ShotSpotter.
Great. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. Alder Santiago.
Right now, at this moment, not again, no questions right now, but it's something that we need in New Haven anyways to expand it. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Alder Morrison.
No questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Walker Myers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one question. Chief, like any other program, nothing is 100%, and that's fine. Do you happen to have the statistics on how many times there is a shooting that maybe somebody call in that ShotSpotter didn't pick up, and ShotSpotter is in that area?
Yes, ma'am. I do. I apologize for not adding that. So I have both ways. So first, for the false positivity rate. So when we went out, when we were dispatched to a call via a ShotSpotter alert, in 2021, 17% were we went there and there was no gunshots. And upon a second listen, it was fireworks or car backfires mostly. And then going the other way, for 2021, we had 698 ShotSpotter hits, and we had to call back ShotSpotter 12 times. So it's hard to be able to say if just on hits for gunfire, if what the accurate number is in terms of that. But what we can say is we had 136 individuals, either homicides or non-fatal shootings. Of those 136 individuals, we called ShotSpotter 12 times to say, because ShotSpotter did not come in. And that's a 1.71% rate of ShotSpotter not indicating that there was a shooting. And we have a confirmed that there was a shooting because we have an individual who was either shot or killed. Now, there are many factors for why that, that discrepancy. It could be that it was in a vehicle. It could be that it was in a home. So there are some things. However, only 12 of the 136 incidents in 2021, which is again 1.7%, but that is something that we work with ShotSpotter after each time just to ensure, and ShotSpotter then does a review internally of each call that we call and request.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker-Myers. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my first question was similar to that. It's in regard to what is the sensitivity and specificity of ShotSpotter in detecting actual shots versus something else like mufflers backfiring, fireworks, etc. That may have covered it, but do you have, numbers, percentages?
So I don't necessarily have the percentages. It is that 17% for 2021 of the calls that we went on were not shots fired. And most times, especially in the months of June and July, those are fireworks. Many times they are mufflers. That also, by listening to that, has kind of alerted us to areas where we can begin investigating the drag racers, because we're hearing them, it's coming in a ShotSpotter due to the backfires, and we're able to use that data for other investigations that that necessarily aren't for shots fired, just because you can hear it in the playback. The officers on scene can hear it in the playback, as can the supervisors who are taking the call. So for 2021, I would say 17%.
Okay, so it is pretty sensitive and specific to gunshots, and then there's other.
Right, and I would say that we would, as a police department, we would rather respond to ones and it not be shots fired than us not get the alert and not be responding and having to call back. So, the officers are going out there, they're getting, and if it was fireworks, there's probably a complaint. We're able to say definitively, this is fireworks. We're able to maybe, they're all in an area, do a canvas, talk to people, maybe some individuals will be out there, and then we can, proceed in a different way.
Can you explain just how it works? So where are they placed and radius of coverage?
So I have ShotSpotter here with us that I feel like that might be more of a technical term that's above my abilities. Ron, would you be, we did have Jack here. Is Jack in the waiting room, Mr. Lucas?
Jack's in the waiting room. If somebody can re-invite him, I think he missed the flash to accept the invitation. But I'd love to have my colleague Jack join us, Chief. Thank you.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, so let me just briefly explain.
Mr. Teachman, would you give us your name and address for the record, please?
Forgive me, you're right. Ron Teachman, T as in Tom, E-A-C-H-M-A-N. Currently down here in Florida, but my domicile is at 57925 Blue Heron Drive, Goshen, Indiana. And by way of introduction, I represent the company, have for 6 years, but prior to that, I was a chief of police twice, installed ShotSpotter in both cities, more recently in South Bend, and then principally in my hometown of New Bedford, Massachusetts, not far from you. So having said that, the quick explanation of how it works. We have placed acoustic sensors. Think of a child's lunchbox containing a host of technology. And that sensor is put on a rooftop of building, occasionally on utility poles. Government buildings first, private, commercial, and residential properties secondarily. We build a robust network much like your cell phone provider has done with cell towers and mini cells, placing them out in fields and on top of rooftops. We're responsible for the build out, for the infrastructure and the maintenance of all the hardware and the software. New Haven PD subscribes to a service. Now, how does it work? Someone fires a gun or there's a loud bang, boom, or pop. The system detects and locates that it hears it. 3, 4, or more sensors are engaged. We locate the source of the noise through triangulation, time differential as to when each sensor time stamped it. And then there's a sophisticated process to go to your question as to how do we know it's gunfire? Well, the simple explanation is we've got some computer algorithms that dismiss most, like 95% of these extraneous noises, fireworks, helicopters, jackhammers, snow plows, truck backfires, and so forth. But before we dispatch a police officer, that data package is sent to an incident review center. Think of a room full of people, a windowless room, and all they do is listen to bangs, booms, and pops. They're working supplemental to your 911 communication center, but where your call takers are taking phone calls about a host of police services, our people are just listening to noises. They're listening to the audio recording, and to the trained ear, we can distinguish fireworks pretty well, but they also look at the acoustic signature that the computer generates. And more importantly, among about 8 things they do, they look at the sensor participation. Now, to your point about false positives, most acoustic occurrences in the city are omnidirectional. A bottle rocket, an M80, mufflers, and so forth, they tend to radiate out in equal ways. But if you shoot a gun, that is a very linear and directional acoustic event. So the sensor participation on the map from the Incident Review Center, we can see which sensors are involved. And if you see them in a line, that's a real indicator that's probably gunfire. Now, I'm not familiar with the data that the chief shared earlier in New Haven. We have surveyed our customers across the country, and a false positives rate is closer to 0.5% based on ground truth showing that there was something other than gunfire. And our positive rate is 97%, pretty much in line with what the chief said. Your data shows that although a contractual guarantee is 90% notification, we're averaging around 97, 98% notification. Missing a few incidences because it could have been shooting into a car from inside the car, could have been point blank to the victim where it's suppressed. There's reasons why the system may not have picked it up. But I think the data you heard from the chief is in line with our performance standards across the country. I hope that answered your question as to how it works. I can elaborate if you need me to.
Thank you, Mr. Teachman. I appreciate that. Alder Festa, you're still asking. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for that explanation. That actually was very helpful. And I noticed your accent from New Bedford. I have a question regarding, you mentioned that, and this may not be a question for you, Mr. Teachman, and maybe for Mr. Gormany or the chief, but you mentioned that they could be placed on a commercial property or utility pole or residential. Do we have to pay a rent for that, if that is the case?
No, and that's a great question. Thank you for that follow-up. That's why I use the analogy to your cell phone. You're providing, or you're paying for a service with AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, or somebody. That subscription service includes all the back-end work for your provider. You're simply paying, instead of yearly, you pay monthly, and you're getting a host of services from that provider. We do the same. If we put our system, our sensor on private property, whether it's commercial or residential, we work that out with the property owner. Very often, they give us access to rooftop out of civic duty. But if there's a need to compensate for electricity or anything like that, we take care of those arrangements. We also indemnify them for any liability for damage, should there be a windstorm and things like that. We also tie into their electrical system. So we give them a full explanation. We have a sign off that we get from the property owner or the person in charge who has authority. And then we go about having our engineers, our electrical workers install it competently. And that same holds true whether it's private, commercial, or residential.
Okay, so it's all included in that price.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then is there a way to overlap? Because the map that was shown showed specific areas. And there were areas that there is absolutely no shot spotter. is there a way to overlap where we could cover a majority of the city
So
with
great
what
point.
we have
So-
in the contract?
Right. So ShotSpotter's business model, unlike a lot of other vendors in public safety that I'm familiar with as a chief, we don't charge by city size, number of sworn. What we charge is the footprint, that is the coverage area. Now that coverage area has been determined by your chief and her command staff based on the data analytics. You want to get the most value for your subscription. So we place the coverage area where you historically have had the most gun crime. If we filled in those blanks, so to speak, that would require us to install more sensors, that would increase the size of your footprint, and that would elevate your cost. If there's a need in the future, or an appetite for expansion, we're happy to come back and have that conversation. But right now, what the chief is trying to do is give you the most value for your tax money by having the coverage area in those neighborhoods where gunfire has been most prevalent, based on historical data analytics of homicides, non-fatal shootings, and other gun crime. We do a heat map with your chief and determine where it's most needed. That has been done historically on the first 5.5 square miles, and now the expansion, again, is data-driven or data-informed.
I believe, Alder Festa, the answer to your question is no.
No. Yeah,
You can always get more if you pay for more, Alder Festa.
Well, right. It's not no, it's yes if you want to pay more. Thank you, Mr. Teachman. Thank you, Chair. I'm all set with my questions.
Thank you, Alder Festa. Alder Furlow.
I have no questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Alder Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Question for Interim Chief Dominguez. You said there were 12 incidents in the last year in which ShotSpotter failed to activate. Is that, or what was the 12 incidents that you mentioned?
We looked at 12. So there were 12 incidents where we had an individual shot or non-fatal shot or fatally shot. And when we're in the middle of the investigation, ShotSpotter did not go off. So we contacted ShotSpotter to say, hey, why didn't it go off? That is not just because it failed. There's multiple reasons as to potentially why it wouldn't go off. If there's a shooting in a house, it's not going to go off. If it's in a car, it potentially might not go off. Mr. Teachman can give a few more examples, which I think may be helpful. So that is where we got that data from, just based on our investigation. Sergeant Boyce is our contact and liaison with ShotSpotter, and he's also in charge of the Bureau of Identification within the Detective Bureau. So he has intimate knowledge as to when we're contacting them and how it's helping to further our investigation. Mr. Teachman?
The only thing I would add to that, Chief, and your explanation was spot on. Besides those you gave, and by the way, the way we narrate this in our contractual agreement, our promise of performance is we will give you better than 90% notification of external unsuppressed gunfire over 25 caliber. Now, what does that disclaimer include? As the chief said, if it's inside of a building, we don't detect it because the acoustic energy doesn't radiate out and engage enough sensors. Shooting into a vehicle or from within a vehicle, that vehicle contains the acoustic event, doesn't reach our sensors. Point blank, the body is a suppressor, silencers, and also our guarantee is over 25 caliber. There may have been an incident where someone used a lower caliber weapon or lower ammunition. And again, the ammunition is such that it doesn't give enough acoustic event for us to detect and locate. So that's why we have not 100% performance, 90% based upon those disqualifiers. But as the chief gave you the data of what we did alert to as to what we didn't, I think you find that our performance is within the scope of the agreement. It's better than 90%.
We get notifications about incidents, of shots fired as well. And just flipping through my emails, I can see at least 20 incidents in the last year where the notifications say ShotSpotter was not activated. So those are also, I guess, to your point, Chief Dominguez, those are incidents where there's no victim. They're just shots being fired and ShotSpotter doesn't pick them up, but they don't hit anyone.
Well, also it depends on the location. So many times it's just like a blanket notification that's going out. So if it's in an area of coverage where there is no shot spotter, many times they'll just be like shot spotter was not activated. And instead of being a little bit more clear from our side, well, there is no shot spotter there. So that's why shot spotter is not activated. So that I would need to do a little bit of a deeper dive into some of the ones that you have. And also I do think it's important moving forward. And I think that's a great point, just to make sure we're being clear in those notifications, because people are looking at them and they're helpful to kind of, to definitely to like you all and city officials to be able to say shot spotter, not available, as opposed to just not detected, and not, it's kind of all encompassing and is not necessarily portraying an accurate picture.
And I think that's a useful point, because I do think we all monitor those really closely, and it's been surprising how many times you see ShotSpotter was not activated. One other thing I was sent about ShotSpotter was issues with ShotSpotter in other municipalities revising their findings. So saying something wasn't a gunshot and then saying it was a gunshot. This had come up in Rochester, New York, I was reading about. And I wanted to understand how that fits into the process you described with the artificial intelligence and human review.
You want me to take that, Chief?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So I think there's been a narrative put out that may be based on some misinformation as to the process. So the computer, the machine classifier, eliminates most of the noise. And if it gets past the machine classifier, it goes to the human for review. That data package that we send out has a location, has number of rounds fired, has the host of information. We ask, as we've done with New Haven, to engage our customers to give us immediate feedback to improve the system. So if there's any feedback from the officers on the street as to location, round count, whether it's a false positive, we want that so we can improve the algorithms and also improve the training for our people. This to me is no different than when I was a police chief and I had people working in 911. You might call 911 with some information about a crime as you know it, but then the officer gets to the scene and the officer has more information based on their investigation and what they find. It doesn't mean that your information was wrong, but it's supplemented and maybe altered somewhat based upon what is found to be at the scene. We solicit that back so we can always improve the service, but I think those minor corrections are just that, they're just minor. The fact is that there was gunfire, location may be changing somewhat because we work within an 82-foot radius. We want to make sure we're more precise. If the round count was wrong because the human may have, they're overlapping gunshots and they thought it was 8, but it could have been 9. You find 9 shell casings. Those are the kind of things that we'll go back. We'll put those in the notes. It doesn't change the outcome. Now, let me just briefly explain a key difference. Independent of what happens in the Incident Review Center, and this is people working, they're trying to get this information out in under 60 seconds because we want our police to respond rapidly and correctly in case there's someone shot, you want to save a life. In homicide and non-fatal cases that go to court, we have a team of forensic experts. Now, they will do an independent review of that event. They have tools and they have time that allow them to overlay in a much more thorough way. So again, going back to my crime scene analogy, a patrolman goes to a crime scene and walks through, makes a note of what they found, and then later you send the crime scene van. Again, they've got tools, they've got time, and they may spend 8, 10, 20 hours at a crime scene combing, looking for forensic evidence. This is what happens, and that's why there may be some difference between what the notes were in the original dispatch and what the expert testifies to when they go to court. We do a package called a detailed forensic report that we send to the prosecutors, both your local prosecutor and your U.S. attorney, whether it's a state or federal prosecution. So there may, in some instances, be some difference in what was originally dispatched to the police and what was found after an 8 to 10 hour review of that one acoustic event based on our forensic experts.
Thanks. Chief Dominguez, will this system interface with the camera system? Will they talk to each other?
Not at this time. It's just another,
Thank
it's
you.
just a cost that we're unable to, sorry. Little people. It's just a cost that we're not able to support right now.
Alder Winter, I think, is that your 4 questions?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. I want to, I'm going to hand it over to the public here in just a moment, but I want to thank Chief Dominguez and Mr. Teachman for the detailed explanation. We're dealing with an item where we've already decided to allocate funds, but there are budgetary decisions ahead in front of us now and in front of us will be in front of us in the future. And so getting some more information about how this works and so that we can make a judgment about the value of the investment, right? Because we're deciding how to, we've already decided to invest some federal dollars in this. That vote the board has taken. But we're going to be voting on whether or not to enter into a contract that requires additional expenditures beyond that allocation, certainly in the future. And so I've been inclined to allow us to go a little bit more detail than just purely budgetary questions, because I think it informs our decision. My only question is totally budgetary, and it's for Mr. Gormany, I think. How do we plan to spend the federal allocation evenly over the 4 years, or use it all up and then use general fund dollars after those federal funds are expended? I'm just thinking about the year-to-year general fund impact of this expansion, which is being, the impact is really reduced because of this federal money, but that federal money is not here forever, as we know. And so at some point it starts to catch up, and then it goes beyond where we've been spending. How do you plan to actually use those federal dollars over the 4 years?
So that's a great question. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think, as we look forward to next fiscal year's budget and future fiscal year budgets related to this item in the funding, I think what we're looking at is maintaining some portion of funding within the general fund year to year, because what you don't want to do is create a cliff. And what I mean by that is all of a sudden take funding out of the police department, and then in the 4th year have to add $500 or $446,000 back into the budget. So what we're looking at is maintaining sort of a status quo budget on the general fund side, and maybe some of those dollars for the first few years may be reallocated towards some other projects and then shifted back to ShotSpotter in the future years. But right now, that $1.2 million is really allocated over essentially a 3.5-year period. Because remember, in the last fiscal year that we can use ARP funding ends in December. So that's half of our fiscal year, right? So there's going to be one fiscal year where we're going to have to look at general fund for half a year and ARP for half a year. But we do intend to use the ARP funding for the first few years fully to pay for the $446,000 cost per year. Again, in this current fiscal year, and I believe Ms. Epson is on the call, on the meeting, I believe, I'm not sure if we satisfied our full contribution for this fiscal year for ShotSpotter, but if the contract is approved and executed, we may possibly use some of it if it hasn't been fully funded for this fiscal year out of ARP funds. So that was a little confusing, but the short answer is that it depends on when we execute the contract and when we actually start to use the ARP funding versus general fund. Whether it's partially in this year or beginning next fiscal year, that will determine how long the ARP funding is available, and then we'll have to shift back over to general fund.
Thank you, Mr. Gormany. Is it fair to say, if I were to try to summarize what you said, that we won't spend it all up front, but stretch it out over the course of the life of the contract so that there's still some general fund skin in the game for this, and we're not zeroing out a budget line that's related to this project?
Correct.
Okay. But we're still looking at the tail end of this contract having a much bigger general fund impact than it does at the beginning.
Absolutely. I think it was mentioned prior that currently without this expansion, we're paying about $336,000, which means that at some point after the life of this contract and the ARP funds are gone, that 336 allocation in general fund becomes 446,000.
Right. And so then the question of the value of the increased investment becomes crucial. So I think it's fair to say that we'll be eager to hear future reports on the effectiveness of the program, either through this committee or the Public Safety Committee, wherever it's appropriate to do. Okay. Would any member of the public wish to testify on item 7, the 4-year agreement with ShotSpotter? And of course, members of the public can raise their hand using the Zoom function or indicate through the Q&A function that they wish to ask a question. They can email New Haven, they can email public testimony at newhavenct.gov or text me, the chair, at 203-843-8102. Would any member of the public wish to testify on this item? And finally, for the third time, would any member of the public wish to testify on this item? Before a motion is appropriate, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Gormany and for all of your guests, Chief Dominguez, Assistant Chief Jacobson, Mr. Pontius, Mr. Teachman, CAO Rush Kittle, happy anniversary, I've been told, 25 years is a blessing, and Ms. Ebsen. Do I have a motion to close the public portion of this meeting?
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
I
sir.
move that we close the public portion of this meeting.
Second.
The motion has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder Hurt.
Yes.
Alder Santiago.
Yes.
Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers.
Yes.
Alder Festa.
Yes.
Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Winter.
Yes.
The ayes have it. The public portion is closed. Before I entertain any motions, I just want to say a word about procedure. It's been our practice in many instances of tentative agreements with unions that we take no action on those items because often we're up against the statutory time limits for taking action. And this is certainly the case now, given that we didn't have a meeting last month. And so my intention is for us to take no action on item number 2, but instead to write a letter to the president of the board requesting that the full board discharge the item in our next full board meeting. And so unless I see people on the committee raising their hands in protest, I think that's what we'll do with item 2. There is a request from the administration to take the same course with items 1, that's the Go Guardian contract, 3, the Kappa agreement, 4, the lease agreement for the continuing ed facility, and 7 for the ShotSpotter contract. If anyone has a strong opinion against taking no action on these items so that the full board may discharge them at its next regular meeting, now would be the time for a member of the committee to say that we shouldn't. I see Alder Richard Furlow.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just say that this certainly falls within your venue as chair, and you don't need our permission.
Thank you, Mr. Majority Leader. Although technically true, I'm certainly looking to see if anyone has any strong objections. But seeing none, I will just affirm for colleagues that what I will do is write a letter to Madam President asking that the full board discharge items 1, 2, 3, 4, and 7 from this committee so that the board may take action on them immediately at the next full board meeting. So do I have a motion on item number 5?
Mr. Chair,
Alder Hurt.
I make a motion that we move item number 5.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. Discussion on the motion. This is the ordinance amendment reclassifying a position in the Vital Statistics Office.
Mr. Chair.
Alder Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would urge my colleagues on this committee to vote in agreement with this item tonight.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. Any further discussion on item number 5? Alder Morrison.
I am in agreement with item number 5. That's the bilingual. Okay, the reclassification. Yes, as we all know, with the times that we're living in, you always need your documentation. You always need your birth certificate and all those different things. You need, marriage certificates, all those things. And so to reclassify, as testified tonight, they'll have more people in position to be able to sign off on things, to make things move a lot faster. And so I am in agreement with this reclassification. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Morrison. Any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder Hurt.
Yes.
Alder Santiago.
Yes.
Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers.
Yes.
Alder Festa.
Yes.
Alder Furlow.
Yes.
And Alder Winter.
Yes.
The ayes have it. The motion is successful. Do I have a motion on item number 6?
Mr.
Alder Hurt.
Chair, I make a motion that we move item number 6.
Item 6 is moved
Second.
and seconded. Any discussion on item number 6? Ms. Alder Hurt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Being that the city is in dire need of these toters, it is important that we continue the recycling process of the city. We have a lot going on in our various communities, and the toters are very important because we do need the help in keeping the community clean. So it is important. And I urge my colleagues to vote favorably on item 6.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. Any further discussion on item number 6? I do have a recommendation. If you read the motion, the effective clause is very straightforward. It reads, "Now therefore be it ordained by the New Haven Board of Alders." It's not an ordinance amendment, so I'm not sure why it uses that verb. We might need to change that. "Now therefore be it ordained by the New Haven Board of Alders that the Department of Parks and Public Works is authorized to exceed the fiscal year 2021-22 contract with SESCO more than $100,000. I think they mean to exceed $100,000, but it doesn't actually give an upper limit. I think it's unwise to give them authorization to exceed $100,000, but not say how far we were willing to let them go. And so I think we ought to, and I think what we heard from the staff was that they thought it might need to go up to $225,000. So then the question for discussion, that's $125,000 more than the $100,000 that's the ceiling now. That's what I took it to mean. So then the question that I would like colleagues to discuss is, should we create an upper limit, a new upper limit? It's currently 100,000. Should we raise it to some other number? And what should that number be? Who wants to discuss that question? Alder Hurt.
Mr. Chair, thank you. If I'm not, maybe I did hear them wrong. I thought they said $125,000. I'm not sure, maybe I didn't hear that, but I thought that's what I heard.
Alder Winter, your hand is raised. Thank you, Alder Hurt. Alder Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard that as well, and it lines up roughly with them saying that it's $80 per toter, and they said 900 toters. Maybe there's other things involved in the delivery, other expenses involved in the delivery and procurement of the toters. But that would roughly, yeah, that's roughly $100,000 right there. So I think I had also understood what the vice chair had understood, and think that for now we could make the amendment to put a ceiling of $125,000. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Don Hayden.
just looking at my records, they did request a top number of 225,000, which was $125,000 increase over the $100,000.
That was what I was led to believe as well. That's a significant increase. But right now, all that we're doing is authorizing them to go above 100. So we should set an upper limit. I see Alder Festa has her hand raised. Alder Festa.
Yes, thank you, Chair Marchand. Is this only for this particular item or overall? To raise the cap?
It's about the contract with Sesco. And so that's the company. So right now they have a contract that doesn't go above the $100,000 threshold for this fiscal year. They want to go above it. And they didn't say by how much. So, but it's just the contract with Sesco. It's not some other expenditure.
Okay, I think we should be careful. Maybe this time around we can increase it to what, the 125 or the 150, but to go to the 225, that's a lot of, that's a huge increase, if that makes any sense. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder
Mr.
Festa.
Chair.
Don, do you have a
Just a
clarifying?
point of order. The reason it came to the board for the increase is because they don't need the board's approval if it's under 100,000, which is what they have.
Correct.
That's why they were trying for the higher number for the remainder of the fiscal year.
Thank you, Don. Yes, they need our authorization. And I'm raising the point about should we cap our authorization because they don't give us a number, although they have given it after the fact, apparently, although there's some confusion about it. Alder Morrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought in the testimony, they did say that basically for the next budget, that $225,000 was going to be the number that they were looking at in the budget anyway. And so I guess my question becomes, if they want to increase it to $225,000 for the year, do we need to do that whole $125,000 for 4 months left of the fiscal year?
Mm-hmm.
You see what I mean? So if the whole year is going to cost $225,000 as they calculated, and now within this year, they only have about 4 months left in the fiscal year, do they actually need that whole 125? That's what got a little confusing for me in regards to the amount. Is there something that like they spent all 100,000 and they know that they need this increase of 125 right now, or what? So I think I'm a little confused, and I appreciate you bringing that, clarifying that right now they're asking for $125,000 more right now for this fiscal year to cover a period of 4 months.
Sure. I think just to be clear, they're not asking for more money per se in the budget, because they have various budget lines that could be used to pay for the contract. What they're asking for is increasing the maximum authorization for what kind of contract they could have with this company. And
Okay.
apparently they plan to buy a ton of totes. And so they need a lot more money to be able to pay for them, well beyond what the current contract allows. So they'll have to find the money in some capital line that they have, right? It's probably a capital, they already said it's a capital budget expenditure. It's a question of how big a contract would we let them have for this fiscal year? And that's the reading of the resolution. And so I think there's a legit question about, are we willing to authorize a contract that big?
Thank you.
Alder Walker Myers is next, and then Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually think we should put the limit up to the 225, because when I was listening to everything that they needed, they also need to replace some. They have a list right now of people actually waiting for the toters. I mean, I can name 15 people in my neighborhood that call me every day about getting another toter. And I send them to the person that they should be talking to about it. But I think that we should take into consideration that this is just an authorization to buy them. And they also said that they're going to be getting a bigger brown ones and all of that. And I think that might actually, they might actually need the 225. And if it exceeds that, then they can come back. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Walker Myers. Alder Festa.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm looking back at my notes, and it looks like they have a backlog of approximately 3 months, approximately 300 toters on a backlog, and they have spent 100K so far, and they usually spend about 60 to 100 per year, or that's what they've spent anyway. So looking at that, I guess if we calculate how much the toters are times 300, we're reaching a high limit. So if it's just for the remainder of the year, then I'm okay with increasing it, but then we need to revisit it, as President Walker Myers mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Alders, for your engagement on this point. Any further discussion before I ask for an amendment? I think the amendment I'm going to ask for is to add the following verbiage. Now, therefore, be it ordered by the New Haven Board of Alders that the Department of Parks and Public Works is authorized to revise the FY 2021-22 contract with SESCO up to an amount of no greater than $225,000. Do I have a motion for an amendment worded that way? Alder Hurt.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Alder Hurt, you have the cue. Are you making that amendment?
Yes.
Yes is all you need to say. All right.
I thought I heard Madam.
No, I'm calling on you, Alder Hurt, because that's our plan. Who seconds it?
Second.
Alder Furlow seconds it. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion of the amendment which I just spoke and Alder Hurt moved? Seeing no discussion, we will call the roll on the amendment only. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder Hurt?
Yes.
Alder Santiago?
Yes.
Alder Morrison?
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers?
Yes.
Alder Festa?
Yes.
Alder Furlow?
Yes.
Alder Winter?
Yes.
The amendment passes. Now back to discussion of the item as amended. Anyone want to speak in favor or in opposition to the item as amended? Alder Hurt?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I am in favor of the item amended, and I urge my colleagues to vote favorably for this item.
Thank you, Alder Hurt. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the Alder Furlow.
And I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I don't have the raise hand function, I guess, because of the device I'm using. But I'm just grateful that we're handling this. You drive through the city and you see broken toters all over the place. Our residents have been asking for bigger toters for the garbage, for the regular garbage. And so I'm happy so that when we hit the summer, we don't have toters that are open with garbage piling on top and drawing flies and rodents all over the place. And so it's going to be a cleaner look for our city. And I'm just happy we're getting it. We can't do this fast enough. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Furlow. Alder Winter.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I echo my colleague in the 27th Ward, the need for this and how frustrating it is for residents to be told, oh, you've got to wait to get your replacement toter. And I also I'm encouraged to hear that city staff will be issuing an RFP because this does seem like exactly the kind of item that you would want a competitive bid for, seeing as there are probably other companies that make similar things that are very similar to a toter, maybe not called a toter. So maybe that can bring down pricing the next time we have to purchase a large number of these. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Alder Winter. Further discussion on the item as amended? For my part, I will say I agree with the colleagues who've spoken so far. I think the RFP process has tremendous value, even if the incumbent wins the process. Sometimes RFPs result in better deals, even if you end up with the same vendor. So it's good discipline to do it periodically, even if you like the company that you're working with. Any further discussion on the item as amended? Seeing none, I will call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder Hurt.
Yes.
Alder Santiago.
Yes.
Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers.
Yes.
Alder Festa.
Yes.
Alder Furlow.
Yes.
Alder Winter.
Yes.
The ayes have it. The item has been moved favorably as amended. Before a motion to adjourn is appropriate, I'd like to make a couple of announcements. The first is, colleagues, we're almost into March, and so that means we're entering into a very busy time for this committee with multiple meetings in the months of March, April, and May. We have a draft schedule, which Vice Chair Hurt and I will discuss in the next day or two and talk over with the leadership. And we should be able to announce the full schedule of meetings for this coming budget cycle. I also want to, and during that period of meetings, we also have regular meetings. So there'll be other regular items coming to us in our regular meetings for those 3 months. And then there are 2 items that are that we haven't yet heard that are kind of big items. An item about the approving the increased contribution from Yale University. That's a item that may have its own meeting. And then the proposed further ARPA allocation from the administration, the $53 million tranche. That will also need to be heard separately from other items, I believe, given the likely large number of people who may want to speak to that. So all that is to say that we're going to have a busy time ahead of us. And I thank colleagues for their participation and their discipline. We're going to need to be tight over the coming months because we're just going to be extremely busy. And I thank everybody for their consideration, for their excellent questions, and for being prepared for the meetings. The last thing I'm going to say is just a note about how we talk about entities we might have contracts with. Sometimes we have cause to question whether or not those entities are giving us the best value, and we might be critical of them, and that's entirely appropriate. But we should be respectful in the way that we refer to any entity, but certainly entities that we do business with and that have a lot of attorneys. So having said all that, a motion to adjourn is now appropriate. Alder Hurt.
Mr. Chair, I make motion that we adjourn.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the roll. Alder Marchand, yes. Alder Hurt.
Yes.
Alder Santiago.
Yes.
Alder Morrison.
Yes.
Alder Walker Myers,
Yes.
Alder Festa,
Yes.
Alder Furlow,
Yes.
and Alder Winter.
Yes.
The ayes have it. The motion carries. We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Good night.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Thanks, Don. Thanks, Al.